My name is Adam Parr, and I'm the host of the Pod City Podcast. This podcast focuses on motivation, mindset, positivity, mental health, and many other areas. In this podcast, I've connected with people from all different walks of life. You can connect with me on social media in the link below. And if you like this podcast, please like, share, and comment and subscribe because it really helps the channel and the podcast to grow. Now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video.
Tuning in, trying to find out how to win. Go along and tell a friend. Marathon, you know the game. Keep on running, never end. Getting better, make amend. Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it, Adam got it. Positivity, 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 positivity. Tune in.
Right, Bonnie, it's great to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
No, you're welcome. It's really good to have you on the podcast. And yeah, I'm good. Cheers. I'm just really grateful to have you on. And I just kind of thought I'd introduce you to kind of talk about kind of like what you do, your kind of story, because you've been on like David Meltzer's 2-minute drill, and you make lots of like clothing and accessories and masks and lots of nice things, and you could like kind of been building that. Like, kind of, how did you kind of get into that, and kind of like what's your kind of like story, and how you kind of got onto TV and into like this field?
Where do I start? So 11 years ago, I got really sick with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and it left me paralyzed, and I had to go through rehab. It was like having a stroke. And I kind of went through that whole healing process, and then had my third child about 1.5 years later, 2 years later. And from there, I was trying, after I got really sick, I lost my job. Start there. I couldn't do my job anymore. I had a lot of cognitive impairments, my memory, and just thinking. I was very foggy. Had a hard time learning anything new and kind of retaining information. So it was like, ended up having my third child, and was looking for ways to kind of make money and help supplement, what my husband was doing. And I was doing reselling on eBay, Poshmark, and a couple of other different things. And then also kind of working on healing. I received a couple more diagnoses after my son was born. RA, which is rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatoid disease, and fibromyalgia. So I was really looking for something that I could do from home within my capacity. And, with the pain that I was having, I was limited to what I could do. That and the fatigue and having a little one. And in 2016, I got pregnant with my fourth in early 2016, and really kind of wanted to dig in and find a way to make money, because it was like we were having our fourth kid. My husband was the only one working. And there was really no future for me at that point to go back to like my old job. I really didn't want to. I didn't get into accounting because I liked it. I got into it because I thought it would be easy for me to do, and I was good at it, and it was a quick degree for me. So I kind of started to go back to like my creative roots. When I got sick, I kind of lost the use of my hands. I was dropping things. I couldn't really grip anymore. And I used to draw, and I used to do all kinds of artwork and different things. And I kind of stopped. Once I tried to pick up a pencil again and try to draw, and realized that it really wasn't happening, I kind of quit for a really long time. And in 2016, I felt kind of drawn back to my creative roots and started working with a cutting machine, which is basically you create a design in a program and send it to the machine, and it cuts as if like a printer would print, but cuts shapes. So I started making different things with vinyl that way. Started out with vinyl decals like you see on people's car windows or you see on a mug. And that was actually really challenging for me, because I was back to trying to use my hands to manipulate small things, which my hands still weren't doing. And I kind of drifted away from the adhesive vinyl and fell into, by request, it's called HTV, which is what you put on clothing, the different type of vinyl. And it's much more forgiving. You can move it around a lot before you have to press it. And I found that I liked working with this way more because I could be as creative as I wanted, but I wasn't really at the mercy of what my hands were able to do as much with this other stuff. And I started making graphic apparel. I was working with a lot of small businesses and organizations, making, group apparel, t-shirts and whatnot. And I've been doing that since late, I think it was Christmas 2016, I made my first apparel piece and started trying to build a business from it, but I kept finding myself getting really burned out. I couldn't figure out why. And it wasn't really until I tried to infuse some purpose into what I was doing in 2018 and then into 19 after kind of, let me back up. 2017, I decided that I was going to quit all of my psych meds. So I have mental health illness history that precedes my physical health history, which actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And I had been taking meds for that since high school. And 2017, after finding out that my doctor, I'm not gonna say he was lying, but I was coming in and saying I had the same problem over and over again for like months and months and years. And one of the medications I had been on for like 15 years was the cause of all of that. And I was just like, I'm done. Like I said, I lost all faith and trust in him and decided I was going to quit them all and find a better way to manage all of my symptoms. And honestly, quitting the meds was probably the best thing I had ever done. Rolling into 2018, I started finding people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, and really started like a mindset shift. I was doing EFT tapping. I met this wonderful friend who was a client who became one of my best friends. And that rolled into 2018. I met Evan Carmichael here in Pittsburgh. In 2018, I started a drug called Humira to try to, how do I say that? So the arthritis had moved to my spine, and I went into my doctor literally bawling my eyes out because I had two little kids to take care of and I wanted to watch them grow up. And I'm like, I don't want to be in a wheelchair. I don't want to be paralyzed again. And what can we do about this? And I started taking Humira in September of 2018, and it wrecked my life. It was probably the worst decision in hindsight that I have made medically, but it really propelled me into some of the best decisions that I've made. Because in 2019, I met Evan. I continued on my mindfulness journey. About 7 months after starting Humira in spring of 2019, I decided I was going to quit that too. I was done with that. I learned that conventional meds just really don't agree with me. Anything I've taken for my RA, the psych meds, everything had really bad side effects / consequences with it for me. And I really, really started to dig in to healing myself naturally. So started, researching supplements and mindfulness techniques. I was doing yoga. I was listening to podcasts and, YouTube of, meditations and uplifting messages and motivational, inspirational content. And in the middle of 2019, when I'm kind of healing from the Humira, I met David Meltzer. And September 2019, I got to meet him in person here in Pittsburgh. And right around that time, he started to mentor me. And it was a life-changing event because I remember talking to him about this campaign that I was trying to run called the Unbreakable Campaign. And that was what I wanted to talk to him about, was business and this campaign. And after talking to him for about 10 minutes, he basically said, you're not doing anything until you take care of your health, until you get your health in check. And I'm like, that was not the advice that I was looking for, right? But it was true. It was what I needed to hear. And I feel like that's really when the healing really started to begin, was in, after that conversation with him, getting really real with myself, very self-aware of where I was and where I wanted to be. And there's a lot I just said, and it covers a lot of years. But I really feel like meeting him helped me change my life. I owe a lot to him. And I've been mentoring with him ever since. So I know I skipped some stuff in between, but it's
No, it's fine. Nice. I really appreciate, kind of sharing your story and going through that. And like you said, like there's a lot of different things that happened at different stages. Um, just kind of like recap, you mentioned like, you had this what's it called? The medical. Yeah,
Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a rare, so it attacks the immune system, kind of like what rheumatoid arthritis does, and it
right.
affects people differently. I wasn't really meant to, so I was semi-unconscious. It was a very bizarre thing. I could hear and feel things, but I couldn't respond to anybody for like 48 hours. It was very, very strange. But I wasn't supposed to come home from the hospital. Like my prognosis was really bad. So to go from that to leaving the hospital 3 weeks later was a pretty big feat in and of itself.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, what you're doing, and what you've been able to do. And like you said, these obstacles have like come up in your life, and you had like no job, and then like you had a couple of kids as well, and then with all this medication you were taking, you kind of came to a stage where you realize this is it now, this is enough. Like you kind of realize that was probably stemmed from a lot of the medication, and then you like you focus on your health, and you've been putting in that work to to work on yourself and to make changes and to benefit you to make your life better, and by creating this brand and what you're doing and doing something that you enjoy, I think is really inspirational. You're not letting things get in the way of you doing, do you know what I mean, something, and following what you want to do. And you've been able to turn that around and to be able to meet incredible people. But like you've really had to put in that work to create those situations, not to because opportunity, there's lots of opportunities and people sometimes don't grab them. You've put in that work to make those steps to reach these people. And I think it's great what you're doing, and you've been able to change, shift and pivot in your life, through learning, and developing, through all this happening.
I think it's interesting, and I've noticed a pattern myself and lots of other people that I've talked to. Trauma is a funny thing. A lot of people, and myself included, and I kind of breezed past this part, but I spent a good first 5 years after getting that trying to go back to my old life, right? Like I didn't want to, I was in like a delayed state of denial or something, where I thought that if I could just find that one thing, everything would go back to normal. I feel like a lot of people are kind of doing that with the pandemic now, and it's like nothing's ever going to be exactly the same. Like this thing that you've had, this trauma, this illness, whatever, it's changed you, and you're never going to be that person again. And you have to kind of leave that old identity behind and think about, like, why did this happen? And not in an over analyzing kind of drive yourself crazy way, because I've done that too, but more of like, what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to learn from this? And I learned that I was doing a lot of shit, sorry, that wasn't healthy. Like my body, I kept telling people, it shut me off like a surge protector almost. It was like, you can't go down the road this way anymore, or you're not going to make it. Like your life is going to be cut short. And it literally just stopped me dead in my tracks, and was like, I was the kind of person where if it wasn't completely blatantly obvious, like I wasn't seeing it. And it was like my body kind of knew that, and it was like, we got to give her a really big wake up call, because she's not listening to all the other signs, like the stomach aches and this and that and headaches and migraines and losing weight. I lost so much weight before I went in the hospital, and I wasn't grasping that I was literally just coping my way through life. So much was going on up until that point, which is part of the reason I was taking so many psych meds. And so I spent a good 5 years probably And not until 2017 when I met my friend and I made that decision to quit my meds. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I don't advise anybody quit their meds the way I do. I really don't. And I think there's a place for them. So just want to give that disclaimer out there that quitting meds suddenly can cause a lot of problems. I was super careful about how I did that. It wasn't like one day I just stopped. But I made the decision to stop and then made the necessary changes. But you're right. It was like once I'd made the decision that I wanted to depend on myself to make my life better. The universe started throwing things out there, like my now best friend, and learning EFT tapping, and then I drove to New Jersey to meet Gary Vaynerchuk in 2018. All these people that I've met were literally split second, like day before decisions. Which I'm learning, I seem to have the best experiences when I make those very quick, not over analytical decisions. The most amazing things happen. But you're right, it is about, which is why I started the Unbreakable campaign. It really is about finding your way to heal and pushing through and knowing that there's something better on the other side of that. And that's really really the message through everything I've ever done has been to try to inspire others that to heal, and that there's still life after your diagnosis, after your trauma, after whatever it is out there. Like, healing hurts, it's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But the rewards that you reap from that, whatever your rewards look like, are so worth it. They really are.
Yeah, that's it. I think, like you mentioned, it's when you're going through something, like in those difficult times, there is like that kind of, the other end of it, that you can push through it and get through it and come out the other side. And I think, if you're going through that at the time, you sometimes feel like there isn't, another side. But like you said, there is, you can shift and you can change, through continuing to do that. And I think, like you said, by how the universe kind of works, and how, by you listening to yourself and making those necessary changes, it kind of, creates a whole new opening for you, if that makes sense. It's just how, the universe works. And it's almost, you said, the best kind of, sometimes not overthinking things and just making those decisions, like, I'm going to do this. And it kind of opens up, different opportunities. And I think like that's definitely how some things work sometimes, isn't it? Deciding and making that choice and just doing it. And sometimes, I think that's, sometimes we can overthink things. And if you overthink things, then you're probably not going to take make those decisions, as quickly. And I think it's nice that, you set up that, is it the Unbreakable code or journey? What's the
Unbreakable campaign.
Campaign, yeah.
So I started that in 2019 after meeting Evan Carmichael, and then a whole bunch of other serendipitous kind of events. I got to talk to Chris Cubby. He's on Twitter. He runs a marketing company, I think in Denmark, I want to say. I won like a session with him, and he's a marketer. He's has a marketing company. That's what he does. And he basically was like, I was struggling. And like I said, I kept hitting burnout, and I couldn't figure out why I was burning out, because I really didn't have, I loved what I did, but I really didn't have a purpose behind it except to make money at that point. And he was like, nothing you're making is unique or special. And I was like, you're out. Another hard slap in the face, but I was like, you're absolutely right. He's like, the stuff that you're making, it can be duplicated. It's not really that different from anything. Somebody else can buy a t-shirt somewhere else that looks very similar to what you're doing. And it really got me thinking. And then after meeting Evan and talking to him, and I was coming off of made the decision to come off the Humira, and all kind of at the same time, like I said, the way the universe puts things in front of you, I decided I wanted to make apparel for people who had were overcome trauma, or we're dealing with a chronic illness and we're learning to thrive versus just survive anymore. And I was going to put each person's like one word on a shirt for them. And I decided very quickly I didn't want to do it that way, because I had done one-off projects, and making one single t-shirt for like 100 people is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I started thinking like about the one word that kind of, brought us all together, like described all of us. And unbreakable was that word, because all of these people had met up against things that were designed to break a person, and they showed that they could push through and that they were unbreakable. And like I said, that's how I ended up starting a campaign. The campaign's on hold right now. I had to make a lot of adjustments to get that restarted, just for my own mental health. I was running into some issues, and again, that's why I said I ended up, it's funny how all these things kind of rolled into each other. That was how I ended up meeting David on Instagram, and then reaching out and messaging him. And like I said, that was my intention, was to ask him, how do I build this? And it was shortly after that, I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready. I have more healing of my own to do before I can run this campaign the way that I want to.
Yeah. I think it's great what you're doing. And I think, like, we have to ultimately heal, don't we, as you mentioned, and to work on ourselves before sometimes doing, the things that we kind of are trying to build or do. It's like, your mental health, or like, healing, and, kind of being okay in yourself, and being health, fully, the best that you can be, to then do what you need to do, isn't it? It's like, your energy levels, because lots of different demands and things like that, and it won't be fair sometimes to probably do things unless, we're okay, kind of thing.
100%. Especially as a mom, that's a lesson that I had to. I'm still, my oldest is 21, and I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
I'm going to say struggling. I'm still relearning this lesson over and over again. Like, it keeps getting put in front of me. Like, where I'll run myself ragged. Like I said, today my son went back to school, and I'm like, I'm going to do all these things. And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do them. I'm not going back into that old pattern. Although I wanted to be productive today and do things and meet with you and all this other thing, I'm like, I'm not going to make myself crazy thinking I have to do a million things just because he's not here. Because all that's going to do is drive me back into overwhelm and exhaustion, and completely defeat the purpose of trying to be productive in the first place. But that was something I definitely, like I said, David pointed out to me. It's something intellectually, right, that we have to fill our own cup before we fill others. But as people, I think, and as a mom, my job was always to take care of my kids. Like, my kids always came first, and I finally had to, and putting myself first felt selfish, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're taught, unfortunately, a lot of us as little kids, is that putting yourself first is selfish. And what I learned from David, really, and the people that I follow, is that you can't give what you don't have, which is why I was always feeling like I was running on empty, because I was trying to give people something that I wasn't giving myself. And a lot of things I focused on was, meditating, which I'm still not great at. I just, meditating is something I struggle with. I listen to guided meditations when I go to sleep, because that's the best way of meditation for me. I don't have, maybe now I'll have some quiet time I can meditate, but I don't have a lot of quiet time where I'm not trying to sleep. But sleep was a big thing I had to focus on. And I have to keep refocusing myself on. Like, I'm a person that in the wintertime, especially here, I need 10 hours of sleep a night. And I had to come to terms with that, because it's frustrating when people are like, oh, 6-7 hours of sleep. And I'm like, I'm losing 4 hours a day. Right. And I'm like, but I'm not really losing it. I'm giving my body what it needs. And that was really a huge mindset shift for me. Was, it's not a waste of time. You're doing what you need to do, which is rest, so that you can be more productive in those, 20, or what is it? I can't even do math. 14 hours you are awake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, those extra 4 hours aren't going to do you any good if you can't think straight. So,
yeah.
we're exhausted.
Well, there's a thing, like, people say you need to get up at XYZ time and all of this, and it's like, it's kind of what you do in that time, isn't it? It's like you can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, but if you're not doing anything between 8, 9, and 10 o'clock, then you could get up at 7. Yeah, you have more time, but you've got to execute on that time, haven't you? It's like you get up at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, or 8 o'clock in the morning, and then put in loads of work. It just depends, I think, what you put in, but it's different for each person, I think. But I think, like, what I'm hearing you say is, like, from what you said, is that you have, like, the sense of self-awareness. You're tapping into be that self-awareness of yourself and how you feel and what you're thinking. And I think that they're the first steps, to tune into yourself and get to know what it is that you need to do and looking after yourself. Because I think, as you said, sometimes in life, people, people are always doing things with other people, but when it comes to themselves, it's like, we're kind of depleted. We're not giving ourselves what we're putting out to other people. And I think I can kind of relate to that in my life and coming back and checking in with myself and understanding, I'm doing a lot, I'm putting a lot out there, but then kind of for me to do that, I need to go away and do you know what I mean, chill out of the weekend or whatever, or do X, Y, Z. And I think it's important that, you recognize that and you incorporate that in your life. But, there are challenges in life, things like that, but you're doing what's right, if that makes sense, like meditating and all of these different things.
Yeah, and I think it's also different for each person. Like me,
Yeah.
At this point, anyways, going out for a run is not going to make me feel better. It's going to knock me out for 3 days. Something I'm going to work back up to, because again, I haven't, like I was telling you before, today was the first day I've been off my property in almost a year. So walking, there's a big hill we walk down to get to the bus stop, and walking back up, I'm like, I got this. Got to the top of the hill, and meanwhile, I've been walking 10,000, 15,000 steps a day, but literally up and down my sidewalk and on the side of my house. So no hills, no nothing, just flat walking back and forth. And but so for me, that wouldn't be energizing, but for somebody else, it would start off their day and give them the energy they need. So it is all about self-awareness. And I think another big thing too is listening to your intuition, which is why I think I mentioned before, making these split-second non-overthinking decisions is me listening to my intuition. And I'm really starting to learn that that I feel like that's what that is not is listening to that idea and then just going with it, versus thinking about all the ways it could go wrong, all the reasons I shouldn't do it, because that's with somebody who's had anxiety for as many years as I have. That's kind of how my mind used to work. It was like, I would have never in a million years dreamed of driving to New Jersey, which is like 8 hours from here, just to give you, I'm with my 2 oldest kids, mind you, and then hop a ferry to go to New York City, like somewhere I've never been, the only technical adult at the time, you know what I mean? Like, and it was amazing. It was one of the most exciting, best experiences of my life. It was exhausting, but it was like a good tired, you know how you lay down at night and you have like you're good tired versus just emotionally drained kind of tired. And that's another thing I've had to really learn to distinguish between the two for myself. And I think it's important for everyone is to be able to distinguish whether you're, good tired, like you've got a lot done and you feel good about yourself and you're tired because you put out a lot of good energy during the day, or are you completely emotionally exhausted and burned out, kind of tired? Because there's definitely a difference. I find too that with that kind of tired, for me, especially like emotional overwhelm, also causes a lot more my symptoms to flare like crazy, like more than any kind of exercise I could do. The emotional stuff is what really kind of knocks me down. So I try to avoid that.
Yeah, but like you said, I think like it's great you're developing, you're developing your self-awareness and you're noticing, what's making you feel good, what isn't, and what you do and don't need. Excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah. So yeah, like you're noticing, self-awareness and what works for you. And there's that, like you said, that drained kind of like tiredness, and then there's like that kind of mentally kind of like tired, but in a good way, as you mentioned. Like, if you're doing a lot of good, it's like if you are revising a course or you're doing something or you're putting out, good energy and doing a lot of productive things, it's that satisfied kind of tiredness, isn't it, in some way? And I think like, making those shifts and doing, those trips to New York, and it's all about that stepping out your comfort zone, isn't it? Stepping out your comfort zone and pushing out, the ordinary to then, going to open up these opportunities, is really, it's where that's like where the growth happens, isn't it? Shifting and doing, that long drive, going to New York, and that's fantastic. And I think, we should all kind of, I think, stretch ourselves and grow in that way. We should all kind of you know, as long as you're looking after your energy and everything else, you know, in between, but to grow as a person.
Yeah, I think it's really important to push ourselves to grow, but to also know where you're pushing yourself into anxiety and overwhelm, because you don't want to be having a little bit of anxiety and overwhelm is normal. It kind of shows you like where you still have growing to do, but you don't want to live in that space. And you also don't want to live in your comfort zone. So there's really like a middle ground of, like you said, there's like a growth area where if you push yourself just enough to get into that area of growth, and then that growth circle kind of gets bigger, right? Because you get comfortable doing those things, and then you kind of push a little bit more. But some people like myself have pushed so much, so fast, so hard out here that we're like in this anxiety, very, very, very uncomfortable, no growth zone, because you're just in overwhelm and anxious mode, and you can't really learn too much when you're in that state of mind. So to kind of dial it back and kind of keep it in, it's hard to explain. It's like a comfortable growth area
Yeah,
or something. Like it's just like an in between.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it's having a little bit of fear and a little bit of feeling anxious, a little bit of feeling nervous is okay and normal when we're growing. You just don't want to get kind of stuck in that
yeah.
feeling all the time.
No,
So
that's it. I think sometimes people can get it mixed up with excitement sometimes, can't they, as well? And I think it sometimes feeling that probably bit of nervousness or excitement is gonna like propel you, forward. It's kind of how you deal with that. And I think, like you was on like TV with David Meltzer and stuff like that. I bet how was that for you? Going on that show, like
so yeah, let me transition to that. So in April, last April, I everything shut down here in March. So that I had zero demand for what I was doing. In that capacity, nobody was getting together. There were no large groups. Small businesses were closed, for the time being. So there was no demand for shirts like I was making them. Plus people conserving their money. But anyways, I was asked first week of April if I would make custom masks. And I was like, nope. And I was like, I don't know how to sew. I was like, I have no idea how to do this. And when that third person asked, I was like, well, this is a sign from the universe. I believe in law of three. I need to figure this out, at least attempt it, right? So I had this 6-year-old vintage sewing machine in my garage, and we pulled it out and dusted it off. I have a video up on Instagram, I think, trying to get this thing to go. And I'm like, oh, we've got power, but I couldn't figure out I had no idea how to work a sewing machine, let alone how to fix one, right? And ultimately decided that it was broken and that wasn't happening. So I talked to a friend of mine who's a seamstress, and the same friend I was talking about earlier. I was like, do you have an extra sewing machine I could borrow? And she brought it over, and it was broken, but it was usable enough for me to figure out how to get this thing going. And about 2 weeks later, I had opened up my Etsy shop. I was making masks. So I learned how to sew, set up my Etsy shop, and was ready to go. And I learned how to make a bunch of different things, pillows, and I was learning how to make skirts, and I've made little outfits for little kids, and that's all up in my Etsy shop. And come August, I had really struggled. So I struggled through not being able to get supplies, and I got around that because my mom helped me kind of clean out people's estate sales. So older women that she knew that were no longer sewing had massive amounts of this stuff just sitting in their house. And I'm like, I'll just take it all. Like, here's a couple $100, give it all to me. Because you couldn't get elastic. Elastic was like $4 for a foot, which it's like 10 cents a foot, just to give you an idea. Like, people were gouging, so it was crazy. So as I'm using all of these vintage materials, and I'm falling in love with this vintage material, and I've always really had this thing about not wasting and using things to their full potential, I decided I wanted to build an upcycling company. Have no idea how to do this. And I talked to David, and he's my business advisor. I'm like, do you think I could scale something like this? And he was like, absolutely. And then it kind of just sat there for a couple months, because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. We're in a pandemic, like all of these different things. But I kept working on my sewing skills. And come like October, he had been doing 2-minute drill on like YouTube and Instagram and whatnot, it's a pitch competition. So you go on, you pitch your business idea, and for the chance to win, prizes. Well, they took it to TV, and they were taking applications. And I was kind of playing around with the idea, but honestly was never seriously considering doing it because I'd listened to people pitch. And I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't have these sales figures. I don't have these numbers. I don't know how to run a business. Like nothing about this makes sense for me to do. And I kept kind of hinting at it and kind of asking him questions like, how do I write a pitch? How do I do this? How do I do that? And the more he was giving me information, the more I'm like, I really, really don't belong here. And it was one of his private coaching group sessions. And he's talking about the pitch competition. And this is like late November. And or mid-November. And he said, yeah, everybody who's, hasn't signed up yet, sign up for the pitch competition. That means you, Bonnie. And like calls me out from the entire group, right? I'm like, shit, now I've got to do this. Like, all right. So I still waited 3 more days to fill out the application. And finally at like 11:30, when I said, I'm just going to do this and fill it out and send it in, and that's going to be the end of it, right? And that wasn't the end of it. I had to write a mini pitch on the spot. And I was amazed because it all kind of came to me. They asked for my, my target audience, which I had been struggling for 4 months to figure out, all of a sudden come to me. And 2 days later, I get the email back saying that I was picked to be a finalist. And I'm screaming, I'm running around yelling and, telling everybody, texting my friends, trying to explain what I'm talking about. So I ended up writing this pitch. It takes me 2.5 weeks. I recorded myself over 400 times practicing this pitch because you've got 2 minutes to pitch your business idea. Yeah, I've like a lot. It's still hanging on my mirror. And the day of, we lost power, the day of recording. And I didn't get power back to like 30 minutes before. So everything's telling me like, you're not meant to do this. This is not for you. Why are you here? Except for David, who called me out. And so we get power back and we get internet back like 5 minutes before I'm supposed to record. And it's 3.5 hours of mostly standing around because it's done virtually, right? And I ended up listening to everybody else's pitch and I was number 5 and I go on. And apparently my internet was so bad that my video was completely pixelated, but they could still hear me. So I give my pitch and I wait some more. And then they tell you whoever's picked as the winner will be the only one seen on the screen. Because the whole time you're staring at a blank screen, except for when you're recording, giving your pitch. And all of a sudden I see my picture pop up and I'm like, shit, I'm like, oh my God. And they announced the winner. And then I can't tell anybody. For like an hour and a half, I couldn't tell my family. I had to stand there quietly because they still had follow-up questions and stuff to do. And I'm going to tell you now, I actually made the ultimate mistake. And it's funny now, but it was not funny at the time. And I went on Instagram and I blabbed that I won in a little short 20-second video. Yeah, I know, right? And I get a call from the team the next day and they're like, you weren't supposed to say anything. And I'm like, I didn't know. I'm like, rookie mistake. I was so freaking excited because the prize was $50,000 in cash and prizes. And the fact that all of these things were telling me you don't belong here, including myself, to end up winning just completely blew my mind. Like I was not even in my body or something. Like I was not thinking clearly. I was so excited. And so I took the post down and there was no harm done, but definitely for 3 days I was walking around going, are they just going to disqualify me? Am I kicked out? Did I lose? Like, are they going to cut? What's going to happen? And everything worked out great. And it's been fabulous. The follow-up to that has been fabulous. It's been about a little over a month since my episode aired. On January 22nd. So if anyone's interested in watching, it's on Amazon Prime. It's called 2 Minute Drill. And I was episode 3. It's also on YouTube. So yeah, it's been phenomenal. And I think I know we're getting close to your time. So I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. So I was muted on the Zoom rather than my mic. No, that's fine. I'm good for time. Honestly, it's fine.
Oh, okay.
And it's incredible journey, isn't it? That the whole process of that, and I think from what you mentioned, just doing it, and like you said, you wasn't going to apply. You kind of was back and forth about it, and then David kind of holding you accountable for being in it. It really does kind of that accountability is quite powerful, isn't it? Actually taking action, and you don't want to let yourself down. You don't let him down and the other
That was
people.
it. Didn't want to go on there, and I didn't want to disappoint him, and I didn't want to embarrass either one of us, and which is why what propelled me to. It wasn't even about winning at that point. It was about not disappointing him and not making him look bad, because I'm like, I'm one of his students. If I go on and deliver this terrible pitch, like how's that going to make us both look? So you're right. That was a huge driving factor for me. And I don't advise that for everything, but for that one thing, it worked out in my favor.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like when you mention the internet went off and all these things happened before, and it's crazy how life happens, isn't it? Sometimes, and like you said, the internet went off, and then you're trying to get on, and it's pixelated, and they can't see you, and then it sounds like when you're rushing, it's like if you're late for a job interview and you're rushing and you miss your bus or whatever. It's like the things that you don't want to happen kind of happen, but you still went through it and did it. And I was thinking about it today, actually. Like showing up. Just showing up. How important it is. I think life happens, things like that, but just by showing up and doing it and being there. And I think it's something that I've learned with podcasting, just showing up, show up, you got to show up. And it's important in life, isn't it? But I think it's great that, you went on the show and you got on the show and you saw it through, and you ended up winning as well. And I think when you think something is going to work out, you're going to feel that excitement, like you said, you wasn't almost in your body, because probably deep down you probably, do you know what I mean, didn't think anything was going to happen. Or
in my mind, and even in talking to a lot of the friends that I grew up with, it's like things like this that just don't happen to people like us, right? And I'm going to say air quotes, like never in a million years growing up did I ever imagine I was going to, I imagined being on TV, but I never thought that it would actually play out. You know what I mean? Like, what was I going to be on TV for, kind of thing? I don't want to be an actor, And so it was very surreal. It's been very surreal. I still haven't fully accepted that it's happened, even though now I'm doing podcasts and I'm talking about it. And I've actually joined David's podcast agency. I think I told you about, so I'm going to be doing more podcasts and getting used to talking about yourself, even though I can talk a lot. And it's different when it's one-on-one and it feels like a conversation, right? Versus I did a newspaper interview and it was awkward. But this is like a conversation. So I end up naturally talking a lot, but talking about yourself, starting that conversation, talking about yourself is very unnatural to me. That was another thing I was working through with David. It was bragging without bragging, being proud of the accomplishments is still something I'm really working through. This is something really big. And to me, it's it feels really big on one hand, but it almost feels too big that it didn't happen, kind of thing. And then talking about it is just, I know it sounds so strange, but there's all the different emotions and things that I've thought about it. It's still not people are you were on TV, and I'm yeah. I'm oh my God. I'm yes, thank you. It's still really hard to accept it, right? And I'm learning how to celebrate myself, which is something I'm just not used to doing. I was brought up don't brag. Being proud is a bad thing. All of these different things. People can be proud of you, but you can't be proud of yourself, which never really made sense to me. But it was constant seeking of approval kind of thing because of that, because you were always relying on somebody else to tell you that you were doing a good job and that they were proud of you. So now it's okay for you to be proud of yourself, kind of thing, if that makes sense. I'm kind of working through this as we're talking, but it's another skill. It's another lesson. And I have to learn something that I'm still, I don't want to say struggling with, because struggling has a negative connotation, but learning to do better with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To be better at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely makes sense. And I think I see that sometimes, other people talk about the same thing, you just mentioned that, owning what you have achieved, your accomplishments, owning that. And, it's like giving yourself a pat on the back, saying, yeah, I've done X, Y, Z. Yeah, so I'm good, good for me for getting X, Y, Z. And I think, like you said, there's a difference between selfishness and that. And that isn't selfishness, but I think like, you know, you have to in your life, you know, to give yourself credit, don't you? Or learn to give yourself credit for what you're doing and that kind of thing. And you know, you have to have that, it's that relationship with yourself, isn't it? And that good relationship with yourself and learning to, you know, nurture that. You know, something that I can definitely relate to. And I think it's important to give yourself credit for what you're doing, isn't it? You know, it's a process. It's a journey. And, you know, when you've been told not to do that or that's not okay, you know, you've got to untangle that and then, you know, like go over that and develop these, you know, new way of living, because it's so important to recognize, achieve. And I think like as well, if you recognize achievements and you give yourself credit for them, you're welcoming more into your life through the universe, if that makes sense. Because sometimes people don't. And it's like if you're doing that, you're kind of putting a hold on that. Does that make sense?
That's a really good point. Yes, actually. And I'm really glad you said that. I think it also, because you're 100% right, being grateful. I don't think I was ever not grateful. I think what's hard for me too, and I was talking to David about this morning, is feeling guilty for doing really well when so much of the world right now is struggling. And I really had a friend of mine call me at one point in the middle of this process, and his life was, everything was going wrong in his life. And he was like, well, how are you? And I said, you know what, I have to tell you, I'm fantastic. Like, I can't sit here and say that I'm not okay because you feel like crap. And I didn't say all of that to him, but in my mind, I'm thinking, I need to claim that I'm doing well, you know, because I want to keep doing well. And that was a really pivotal thing for me, because I think a lot of times people, they commiserate, right? And, oh, I know that's terrible. I'm so sorry that that's happening to you. And this, you know, and I've done that. I've been doing that my entire life. And owning that things were going well, admitting that they were going well, and being happy that they're going well, grateful, just invites more into your life, like you said. And I think part of this also stems from self-confidence. And because you don't believe you can accomplish it, and then you accomplish it, it's kind of like, oh, that's great, that happened. And then you kind of fall back on the lack of self-confidence, but that was kind of like a one-time thing, like in your mind, you know, like you're not saying these things out loud, but I think sometimes consciously we think like, oh, well, that was a fluke, you know. And you're right, owning, accepting, and being grateful for it are the next steps to inviting more of it and more chances to prove yourself to yourself that you're competent and capable of doing these things, which just then builds more self-confidence.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think you know, it inspires other people as well to create things and to do things, you know, as well, because they'll hear your story and they'll see what you're doing, and they'll be like, gosh, look at, you know, what she's doing and what she's been through, and you know what she's doing now. And you know, it's that ripple effect almost, you know, that kind of, you know, what you're doing is powerful and it can inspire other people, because there's plenty more people out there who think like, who've been in that place, if that makes sense. Who I speak to a lot of people who don't post content, or they might struggle posting content, you know, and that kind of thing. And just by and taking those small steps, and that they hear other people's stories and you know, and then they go and do it. It's quite remarkable how it kind of works. You know, there's all these things that lead up to that moment, if that makes sense, or things that kind of build you, you know, to push you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's important too to point out that none of this I did in confidence. I mean, I'm sure it's evident from my story. I'm telling you, I didn't do it in confidence. I did it with the fear. Like I did it despite the fear. Like I felt all of the fear and the scary things happening and panicking. And, you know, again, there was a lot more involved in the process of writing and producing a pitch. And a lot of it was, oh shit moments. Like, what am I doing here? Like, but I had to keep going because I kind of made that promise that I, you know, by being accepted, that I was going to follow through and do this. And again, it's funny because there's that anxiety zone and there's the fear zone. And I think doing it, it was a different kind of fear. It was a different kind of anxiety. But doing it despite the fear, taking those first steps despite being afraid, because if by being afraid and not doing anything, you're not going to make any progress.
Mm.
And I think people get it stuck in their head where they see people like me or people who are famous or people who are like Gary or even you and go, oh, well, they're confident. They don't have any fear about any of this. They're not afraid of it. You know, they feel like they can do it and they do it. And it's like, that's really not the case. And if more people talk about the fact that, no, I'm really not, I was not confident when I went into this process. I'm getting more confident the more I practice and the more I do it. And it has to be, I'm sure it was like podcasting. Like, I'm sure your first
Yeah.
podcast wasn't like the most brilliant thing ever. I mean, maybe it was, but you know, like my first YouTube video sucked and I did it like 30 times. It was just being not being afraid to suck. You know what I mean? Like, everybody sucks at things when they're doing it the first time. Most people are afraid when they do things the first time, but it's really, I don't want to say pushing through the fear. It's kind of like you got to ignore it. Like, it's not even there. Like, just do it anyways.
That's
I think
it.
people feel that for different things and that they've, you know, attempted to do in their life.
No, definitely. I think, you know, like there's always going to be sometimes something that is going to present you that feel, you know, and I think if it doesn't scare you, then, you know, you're not always going to grow, if that makes sense, you know, like it has to kind of scare you, or has to kind of scare you, but you know, that fear is there, and it's like, you know, noticing it in a, you know, like either, you know, just kind of pushing it to a side and just focusing. And I think like the more you do something, the more confident you get, and it just builds like a snowball over time, if that makes sense. So like doing these kind of things, like, you know, video call, like with podcasting, the first 60 episodes I did, I think, or 50 were on audio. I didn't want to do video. I wasn't confident doing video. Didn't want to do it. I felt uneasy, you know, like that self-confidence thing. How am I going to look? What are people going to think? All of these things. And you have to kind of notice what's coming up, and to, you know, kind of push through that and not let that kind of drown out and stop you from doing those things. And, you know, it's like in what you're doing as well, like it all kind of, you know, you think back to however long ago, you know, and what you was doing. Like I look back at, you know, some of the old clips I did. I remember like posting videos and then deleting, you know, or talking to the camera and then looking away, or, you know, or, you know, that because my confidence wasn't there. But as you mentioned, it's, you know, the more you do it, you grow, you know.
Yeah, I think, and that was like goes back to what we were saying earlier about the, you know, the comfort zone and kind of like the learning outside of the comfort zone, and then like this anxiety zone. Actually, I think David did a chart, now that I'm thinking about it, saying this out loud. I think in his book he actually has something drawn up just like that. It's the same kind of thing. And I think the other thing people, and myself included, think about this big picture and how scary all of that is, and really all you got to do is take that very first step. Like what you did with podcasting, you did it audio first because you didn't want to be on video, but you at least did the audio to get used to that part of it, right? And so you were ready and comfortable to at least try the video. And I think that's really important to note too, is that just you don't have to jump all the way into whatever it is you're trying to do. Just take that, you know, the very first step. That's really important, and then build that confidence as you go.
That's really important when you mentioned that, and I think a lot of people should put it into the way that you just mentioned it then, because a lot of people with social media, and media is great, you know, it's a great tool, but a lot of people sometimes look at other people, what they're doing, and they ultimately think that's how I'm meant to be doing it, you know, or they feel under pressure because there's this kind of like normal, you know, quotation way of appearing or doing, you know, or you know, on video. I see that a lot of that on, you know, LinkedIn, and it can probably, you know, stop, you know, knock people back because they might compare themselves. But I think, as you mentioned, like it's those small steps, you know, that first step, you know, is the most important bit, and it's learning that process, isn't it? You know, those steps that build.
Yeah, I think that's people are comparing. So like I can't Evan Carmichael is a good example. He's been making YouTube videos for a really long time, and he's phenomenal at it. He's got an awesome setup. He's a natural. He's been doing this for 10 years. There is no way I'm going to get on a video and be Evan Carmichael, like ready. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how many, even I could have all the same lights, the same setup, the same everything. I am never going to be as good as him in my first video as he is in his like how many thousands video. You know what I mean? And I think you're right. People compare it, and there's a quote that goes around Instagram and Facebook and every too often is like not to compare yourself to someone else's highlight reel. And that's a really important thing. Like you can't, I'm not Kim Kardashian. Like I'm not going to hop onto Instagram and make these gorgeous photos because I'm not her. Like right off the bat. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to build your way up to something like that.
Yeah, that's it. And everyone's kind of their own path, aren't they? You're on your path, I'm on mine,
right.
Whoever else is on their path. And I think, you're just focus on your own path, isn't it? And not comparing it to someone else's sometimes, because they've got their thing going on, and it's kind of looking at it like that as well, isn't it? And
right.
I was thinking as well, do you have any like favorite books or anything like that you like to read?
I have stacks and stacks and stacks of books. I go through phases with books. So like I'll read like 5 or 10 books in a very short period of time, like a month or so. And then I won't read anything for a while.
In a month?
Yeah, I crush books. I'll crush a book or two in a weekend. I read really fast.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You inspiring me to do that.
Well, again, it's been lots and lots of practice.
Yeah.
Jim Quick is great for that, learning how to kind of pick up your reading speed. But I was naturally a fast reader, just because all I did as a kid was read. But really, so I just started reading a book, and I'm going to forget her name because I just picked the book up. But it's called Brag Better, which was suggested by David after our conversation. David Meltzer's Connected to Goodness is one of my favorite books. To Kill a Mockingbird has been a favorite book of mine since 5th grade when we first learned about it. Actually, probably it was like 3rd or 4th grade. I went to a very strange private school. Yeah. We read stuff like that's like an 8th grade book, right? And we were reading it in 3rd or 4th grade. And I'm really glad because it definitely became one of my favorite books and movies to watch. What else? I really just, I don't want to say self-help books, but I guess that's what they're categorized.
Like personal development, yeah.
Books, like Gabby Bernstein, I love to read her stuff. She's more on the spiritual side of personal growth. Vishen wrote a book called Limitless. Is it Limitless? No, I'm probably going to get
Vishen Lakhiani.
Yeah.
He did I think, is it something source code of the mind, something like that?
Yeah,
something
that
code.
One. Yeah, and I'm getting his and Jim Quick's book. Jim Quick's book was Limitless. I know what they are and I know who they are, but I tend to mix them up. But
it's
pretty much anything in that kind of that sphere, that realm of books. But I definitely have an entire stack that I need to get through right now, sitting in my living room for the next reading spurt.
Yeah. No, it's important to read, isn't it? I'm the same. I've got lots of books that I'm kind of trying to work through, and you can learn a lot from books, and take a lot from them as well. And that book's called is it Code of the Extraordinary Mind?
That's it.
Yeah. Yes. I read that a long time ago. I gave it to my brother to read. It's just up there. But Limitless looks good. My brother's read that. I haven't read it, but I've heard good things, and I think to read different kind of books as well. It's good to have a variety in the selection, and you can definitely take a lot from them. And I'm going to try and do what you're doing and try and read more than one for practice.
I really do follow my intuition when it comes to that. It's like sometimes I just need to suck up a whole bunch of knowledge all at once. And it's like getting all of these different viewpoints about some of the same topics and then kind of sorting everything out and then putting whatever. I'll feel called to just read and read and read. Some of my other favorite books are, so my word for 2020 was I'm going to totally forget it, was surrender. And really just kind of letting the universe guide me through everything that I was doing last year. And I'm still doing that now. I'm trying to get a lot better at listening to my intuition. And I'm really a big believer now in kind of leap and the universe will catch you kind of thing, which is what I was talking about earlier. It's not as easy to constantly live as it is to say, that's for sure. But it's definitely a concept and a belief that I now really see has worked for me, especially making the split-second decisions.
That's it.
But surrender, there was a surrender experiment by Michael Singer was the first introduction to surrender that was what I was getting at. It was a really good book.
No, I definitely have to check it out. I'll definitely put it, in the bio for people to kind of read as well. And like I'll just to like round up, I was just thinking like, do you have any kind of mentors or role models? Like growing up or like kind of now? Like whether that's personal friends, family, or anyone kind of like
Growing up, I'm gonna be honest. My childhood was pretty tumultuous, pretty chaotic, pretty all over the place. And I spent a lot of time at my best friend's house as a child, all the way through high school. And now, really, my mentors, David is a personal mentor and friend of mine. And I have a tendency to really kind of stick with one person, and then kind of have the other people in the background. So I read a lot of different books by these different people and I follow them on social media. I really connected with David though on like a different spiritual level. Like I've had other mentors like Carmichael and Gary Vaynerchuk. And both of them are kind of now coming more into the mindfulness and space, which I find very interesting and I'm enjoying watching that happen. But David was business and spirituality kind of like meshed into one, which for me is what I really needed and what I really connected with. Like I said, he called me out in our first meeting saying, you're not ready for business. Like you need to focus on your health. And to me, that was a really big deal because although I didn't want to hear it, it was putting me first. Not like I can make you all this money. And I'm not going to do that. If you do this and this and this and this and this, you could be, making $1 million next year. It was none of that. None of that. You know what I mean? It was, he really actually cared about my well-being and my growth as a person, not just, not dollar signs. Not that those other people do, but I'm just saying I really connected to him because of that. So I find that life kind of delivers me, or the universe delivers me, my mentors as I need them and in the way that I need them. So I kind of just find inspiration and mentors in different places and experts and take what I need and keep going kind of thing.
No, that's awesome. And I think, mentors and role models change and, that's okay. And I think like it's important ultimately, I think, to have role models and mentors, kind of in your life, because you can take a lot of, growth, as a person to, kind of see that, listen to their content and look at their lessons and what they're doing. And you can kind of like identify with them and, in your own way, if that makes sense, can't you as well?
It does too, because I actually have a coach too who started out as a business coach, but she kind of morphed and changed what she was doing and how she was doing it. It was funny because I was kind of doing the same thing on my own path at the same time, which is why I still talk to her as a coach like once a month about different specific things. And she's now more kind of on the spiritual side of things than on the business side. And we kind of both have gone that same direction with each other. It just in general, but also together. So she's a role model to me as well, because she lives her life on her terms. You know what I mean? And I've watched her grow just as much as she's watched me grow over the past 2 years. So we have a good relationship too, which I really adore her.
That's really nice. It's really nice that you have that with her. And I think like, it's important, isn't it, to have these good positive relationships with people and to have, that community and support, around you that are going to, support you in what you're doing, as well. And, to be around these kind of people is, really, really important. And where can people find you on, social media and, your website and that kind of thing?
So I'm Posh Notions across social media, and my website is poshnotions.com. My Etsy store is www.etsy.com/shop/Posh Notions, which you could probably just search me on. They're much easier. And yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, pretty much everywhere except for LinkedIn right now because I'm locked out for some reason. So yeah, it's Posh Notions. Just throw that up there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll definitely, I'll share your content for you and put, put it in the bio, and because I really like what you're doing, and I really, really appreciate, connecting with you. And yeah, I just want to, say thank you to is it what if John Waterfunk, who made the
Yes.
connection for me and you, and really grateful for that. And it's been great talking to you, and I wish you all the best in what you're doing.
Thank
Keep
you so
on
much.
at it. No, you're welcome.
I appreciate the time that we've spent together too. And yeah, I think I asked him if he knew anybody, and that's how I was interested. That was doing podcasting, and that's how I found you.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. I'm really grateful, and I definitely stay in touch, and I wish you all the best in what you're doing, and yeah, just keep on going.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No,
You as
you're
well.
welcome.
I enjoyed
You're welcome.
listening to yours and David's interview. Actually, it was fascinating that how I met you is completely separate, but somehow we still had that connection.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy how it works sometimes, and like how you kind of got connected with him, and I got connected with him as well, and I had him on the show, and it's
Yeah.
quite nice how that's like with the universe and how the universe works. It's nice how the kind of the dots get kind of pieced together, and these connections. It's quite, but yeah, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Yeah,
Sorry, I lost you for a
that's what.
second. But yeah, you're right.
But
I love how the universe kind of just brings, like I said, surrender is a big word for me. And if I keep staying mindful of that, the universe seems to fill
yeah,
in the pieces for me.
gaps. Yeah, that's it. No, that exactly. But I stay in touch, and hope you have a great day, and all the best in what you do.
Thank you so much. You too.
No, you're welcome. You take care. Cheers, guys.